OTAs and minicamps are done. Somehow players running against air, they still got hurt. Who are the ones we're supposed to be concerned about? Hey, let's find out. Because bienvenidos and welcome to the Injury Prone Podcast. This is Jorge Martin, compadre Edwin Porras, Dr. Edwin Porras. ¿Cómo estamos, compa?
We're good. Estamos listos, estamos ready. Vamos a hablar más español en el podcast porque lo necesitan para la cultura.
Oh, eso sí. De veras, sí tenemos que ver un poquito del español, bastante del español. Yeah, and you know, we can make the Spanglish where we just mix in the español poquito aquí, poquito acá, and right back into the English and that. But, compa, you know, it's amazing how every year, cada año, we see guys in OTAs and minicamps. They're in shorts. They're not in pads or anything like that. They still get hurt. They still get hurt. Now they're talking about possibly, you know, doing away with OTAs and minicamps. Obviously, there's be different things for rookies, but then all of a sudden making it one long training camp, probably like late June or right after the 4th of July, all the way through, kind of like spring training. Now you live spring training. I live spring training. You know, I've done spring training 2 weeks at a time, which was just enough for me, but you've done it all 7 weeks, even getting there before. How plausible is that for the NFL?
That's a long time. I'll say That's a long time. I mean, you're trading. To me, it's 6 of one, half dozen of another. If NFL training camp, which I can't say I've been to an NFL training camp, but if it's anything like spring training for the staffs, especially, good luck. Right? That's a lot of the times, especially if they're in the hotter places, right? The places that aren't in domes, especially, they got to get up and they're out on the field probably around 5:30 just to get some work in before the sun comes up, especially in June and July. That's going to be brutal. Then they got to come back in the evening, right? A lot of times they can come back if the sun goes down, if it's too hot where they're at. So that's, I don't know. I think that MLB is also doing away with a lot of, you know, work related time periods. The MLB also now for the minor leaguers has this thing called the dead period, where it's essentially like a 2 to 3 week period in between the end of after the World Series and like through January, where there can be no contact, formal contact with the players. So, you know, I can see the NFL moving towards that, and the idea of like a full blown training camp that does that is like the opposite. So, you know, if they'll have to compensate with something like a dead period, if that's the case. So I don't know how that's going to work. That's at least for minor leaguers, right? Big leaguers, it's a different story, and the NFL would be considered more big leaguers. So if they end up going something longer, that's, again, I will pray for the medical staff specifically, because I know they're going to be absolutely drained.
Especially considering the fact that, you know, it's not, I know in baseball, you know, you're talking about, you know, the 40-man roster, there's going to be non-roster invitees, and then you got minor leaguers who have their own training staff on the other side of camp. So, I mean, hundreds of players. The NFL, it's 90 guys, which is still, you know, a significant amount. It sounds like a lot. I almost feel like they have to work in more non-hitting periods just to get people to, you know, kind of last. I think a big thing would be that would be good. Offensive lines might be a little bit better, so they might get a little more cohesion. But man, that's. I don't know. I mean, and then what would we do basically from the end of from the end of May until late June for as far as content is concerned. So we'll have to make stuff up. So it could be fun. So
you know, and we'll say people already make stuff up. People already panic for no reasons. People already have. Don't worry, compadre. The people on the Twitters will find something to be scared about in May, June, and July.
Well, you know what, the training camps the mini camps gave people something to be worried about and concerned about. I mean, Twitter sphere went, you know, puro loco for all this, but over some of the guys with the players. So that's why, you know, we thought it'd be a good idea to get a little heat check on some of the injuries that happened during mini camps, and if there's any kind of concern level. So it's gonna be a little bit quicker hitting episode, familia, before we get in there, before we get into our next episode, which will go back to a position group. But compa, you know, one guy that we did a video on him, got a lot of play Anthony Richardson's had some shoulder soreness. Now, James Boyd in the Familia FFB podcast, he sat down with me in the first episode of my NFL Insider series, talked about how he gave me straight from the field. He was taking snaps, but sometimes he would throw left-handed. So just to get the rep in, but he would throw it left-handed. Talked about how he had soreness. Also talked about how he started throwing at 5 months when it was originally expected that he was going to start throwing at 8 months, which is right about now since he had his surgery. So could this be considered, kind of like normal soreness for maybe a guy who got a little overzealous?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you start throwing too soon, almost every guy, whether they have, I'm thinking of baseball, if they have TJ or if they just have a sprain, most return to throwing programs have some sort of, I want to call it a hiccup or, a roadblock or some sort of speed bump, right? They all sort, because we're not perfect at writing those. Every individual's different, every shoulder's different, every person's different. It's not a perfect science writing a return to throw program. And especially if he was supposed to start throwing at 8 months, which I find that kind of interesting. That seems a little late, but if you're supposed to start at 8 and you start at 5, like, yes, you're going to have some soreness. It's going to be tight. This isn't anything that should linger beyond training camp. Realistically, I am still not concerned about Anthony Richardson. If his ADP takes a dip, I will continue to hammer that. I know you're good friends with the boys and girls over at Yahoo, and I saw Dalton Del Don rank Anthony Richardson as the number 1 overall quarterback.
Let's go.
I'm right there with him. I like when Dalton takes stands like that. It's one of my favorite things that he does. It's probably my favorite thing about him as an analyst, and I'm going to be right there with him. I'm going to be behind him. I'd love to get him on the pod here, and we can interview him and ask him all about that and just have an hour-long Anthony Richardson QB1 episode.
You know what? I think we may have to do that. I'll get all our amigos from Yahoo. Matt Harmon also mentioned coming on, so let's do it. Compa, I've got the 102 in my Scott Fishbowl draft in about 4 weeks. I'm really considering taking Este Hombre, Anthony Richardson, AR5. So really, really think about it, because I think he could break fantasy this year. I think we could be talking about, even if he throws for 3,500 to, under 4,000 yards, I think he's gonna run 800 to 1,000 yards and maybe get 10 touchdowns and just break fantasy. James Boyd from The Athletic also very, very high on him. So muy bien. Feeling good. We're great leadoff hitter. Now, in the 2-hole, one of the most important running backs. He's going off at the number 7 pick in a lot of underdog fantasy drafts. Breece Hall experiencing some lower body soreness, kind of working off to the side. Now we've got 6 weeks to kind of like clean that up. But where's your level of concern?
I don't want to call it concern. I'm curious. Anytime you get something called like lower body and then a guy has had an ACL, and I say this, I've said this over and over on the podcast, like, you always are concerned for Todd Gurley knee syndrome. And so that's a consideration. I don't even want to call it a concern yet. It could be nothing. It really could be. You see a lot of times, even in these mandatory camps, I mean, Aaron Rodgers is off, doing ayahuasca or whatever he's doing, running for president. I don't really know what the guy's doing these days. Whatever he's doing, he missed mandatory minicamp. Breece Hall is out. So like mandatory seems to be a pretty, loose term to me. I'm hoping it's nothing. I can't say it's nothing, but I'll say 9 times out of 10, usually in minicamp, when a guy sits out, it's nothing. So you do want to watch the practice reports as they start to roll in August, the preseason and stuff like that. If this continues, if this persists, if it's a knee issue particularly, then we want to learn more about it. But for right now, I wouldn't worry quite yet.
Okay. Yeah. Still going off. In fact, I did an underdog draft this morning, and I had Breece Hall and Justin Jefferson facing me at the 107. And, I've gotten a lot of Breece already, but I went Justin Jefferson just to be safe, just to get some variety up there. So plus I think his closing schedule is phenomenal. Jefferson is. So, compa, another running back experiencing some lower body some lower body soreness, soft tissue soreness. That almost always means lower body, right?
Yeah, almost always. Probably something lower body, right? You're thinking hamstring, you're thinking groin, you're thinking, calf potentially. Like, those are the general things that come to mind. when you are looking at lower body, soft tissue type stuff. And it can come back and be an issue, right? And before week one, leading up to week one, Ken Walker had a groin issue. That became a thing later down the line. Miles Sanders, I don't remember because honestly he fell off the radar. Miles Sanders did, but he had a groin issue last year coming into the season. Jalen Waddle had that quote midsection issue that never became a thing. Jerome Ford had a hamstring, never really came to fruition. Nothing happened after that. Jerry Jeudy had a hamstring. Remember the great scare of Jerry Jeudy in 2023, the summer where everybody thought he was, Adam Schefter said he was going to be done for 6 or 7 weeks, and then he comes back pretty quickly. The whole thing. Just tune into the podcast. Just subscribe, everybody. Like, I promise you we're going to give you better information. And I don't say this flippantly. We're going to give you better information when it comes to an injury perspective, sometimes even more so than Adam Schefter. In some cases, I've done this long enough that we understand how to read between the lines. I've dealt with enough actual real life injuries to help you out. Just subscribe to the podcast. Tell one friend, subscribe to the podcast. Okay. So anyway, could it be something for Jahmyr Gibbs? It could be. Could it pop up? It could be, but right now, again, there's no groundbreaking information that should lead us to, not draft Jahmyr Gibbs, especially in that backfield.
Yeah, coming off, and he's coming off at the tail end of the first round, and just people are expecting electric things out of that backfield. So, until you tell me different, compa, I'm still firing him up at the end of the first round. So, next one, we got a trio of rookie wide receivers. I grouped them for a reason, and I think, and if I mean, you're going to figure out why. Xavier Worthy, Odunze, Xavier Legette. What do they have in common? They're all rookie wide receivers. What else do they have in common? They all ran at the combine, having hamstring issues, compa. You talked on a previous episode when we talked about training for the NFL Combine as opposed to training for football, how different that is. Is this just basically kind of like possibly just kind of like the result of that switch?
Yeah, I don't want to call it the result necessarily, but I'll probably influenced where they are now, right? Because like I said, they were probably some of them were probably cutting weight. These guys are trying to hit PRs. They were training to be fast, not training for football. And then now maybe they put a few more pounds on, which for that level makes a big difference. 5 pounds is a big difference for these guys. You look at the training regimen for rookies as well. It's not a surprise that these rookies are having these hamstring issues because they're still adjusting to NFL workloads. Yeah, they just had, and we've talked about this before, like you said, the workloads for an incoming prospect are all over the place. Their travel schedule is all over the place. Their stress level is all over the place. They just came into money. They're trying to figure out their family situation. They're trying to find a place to live. They're trying to adjust to their new teammates. They're trying to prove themselves in camp. All those internal stressors, we call that internal stressors, before you even get into how many routes are they running in a day. So I'm not surprised this is an issue for the rookies. A lot of times the younger guys can bounce back anyway. I wouldn't be too concerned with them either. But yeah, it is something to keep an eye on. But yeah, that's a good call out by you.
Yeah, we're going to follow this one. I mean, obviously, all three of them could have significant roles with their team. Worthy is expected to, be one of the top receivers for the Chiefs, and Legette could be a good complement to Garrett Wilson, and Odunze, kind of like the third leg in, along with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, could be a special offensive attack for the Bears. So yeah, definitely, guys. Hey, amigos, amigas, we're going to be keeping an eye on this one, these three really, really closely. So making sure those ADPs rise and fall, probably based on what Edwin says. So, all right. So, compa, another guy who's got a pretty high ADP going in the second round of underdog drafts, Chris Olave, suffered a shoulder injury, lifting weights right before minicamp. He had the red jersey on, so no contact jersey. He was still going through some individual drills. Where level of concern on this one?
Yeah, this is kind of weird, to be honest. I don't necessarily know what happened in the weight room. That could have possibly, maybe he, I don't know, like strained his shoulder, or he was pressing too much overhead, or whatever the case may be. It's obviously something it's probably not a strain. I would say it's definitely not at least I don't want to say definitely, but it's probably not something that was overused, right? It could have been something like, and I don't want to freak anybody out, it could have been like a brief subluxation where the shoulder sort of clicked in, clicked out, you're right, or clicked out, clicked in, type thing, which, because that's when you would be worried about like contact specifically. So you'd throw no contact jersey on him. So maybe he was pressing a ton of weight overhead and he had a little issue there. I would consider it a tweak. I wouldn't be too, again, a lot of these, the result is going to be, I'm not going to be too concerned about it. Especially since, we're sitting here still in June. I'm not too concerned about this, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, definitely with someone like that. I mean, is it better to have, I mean, better, but is it less worrisome if it's an upper body injury versus a lower body injury at this point, going, but it's still a month and a half from training camp?
No, maybe the lower body is probably a little more concerning just because it is a soft tissue type thing. Soft tissue can be stubborn. If you don't take care of it the right way, then it can linger a little bit. But no, I'm not too concerned one way or the other quite yet.
Having soft tissue linger a little bit. Joe Burrow. I didn't say that. I didn't really say Joe Burrow, did I? Compa, one of the videos that we've had that had some of the most views was Nick Chubb, the Nick Chubb video that we did, talking about kind of like his timeline. We did it over I think almost 2 months ago. I think we did it right around the NFL draft, and he came out at the tail end of minicamp where he said that he had no timeline for return. So it sounds similar. Again, he had that second, knee surgery in November, and you've laid out the timeline. Is it pretty par for the course that the training staff and him are kind of saying that we're taking it slow and we're taking it easy on this one at this point, and but also the fact that he's actually talking about it?
No, yeah, it's a 100%. Taking it day by day is exactly what they have to do. This is a 28-year-old with a previous torn PCL, now dealing with recovering from a meniscus and recovering from an ACL. Again, it's going to be 9 months at least from the point of his ACL. I would lean probably closer to that 10-month mark to where we're really going to see a full, ready to go Nick Chubb if everything goes right with no setbacks, right? The worst of it, the worst setback that can happen is a J.K. Dobbins type. And the best type of recovery you can really wish for is the Breece Hall type that we saw last year. I think he's going to land somewhere in the middle, which would lead me to think, 10 months is probably a pretty accurate timeline. If he were 5 years younger, if he were a little bit more athletic, and, that would be something that I would feel a lot better about it. I can see Nick Chubb having a, Javonte Williams-like season. I know I've said that before. This year, I'm just a little concerned with the meniscus specifically causing persistent pain, swelling, locking. We know that just a meniscus just by itself leads to less volume, leads to worse efficiency. Now pile on the ACL. It just doesn't seem worth it to really take Nick Chubb at this point. I'll say this. If I had to put a number on it, there's probably about a 5% chance he breaks through, proves me wrong, shoves it down my throat, and we're talking about how Nick Chubb is, still one of the greatest running backs we've ever seen in 2024. There's about a 5% chance that happens in my head. I don't want to count him out, but I just can't see myself wanting to, take on that risk. And a question I got on Twitter, which I think is worth addressing, is there a chance that we just never see Breece Hall again? Obviously, with the Todd Gurley thing that I talked about, there's a chance. I don't want to say that it's a good chance, but 3 surgeries on one knee, and they're called intra-articular, inside the joint surgeries. I don't love that for his longevity. I don't love that for his immediate impact, his ability to be immediately impactful. And I think that the Browns are right to take their time with him. And, I just don't see him being a big contributor in 2024. Even if he is, we probably really won't see him contribute until that, 11-month-ish post-op month for his ACL. So, if you're going to take Nick Chubb at this point, in my opinion, you're burning a roster spot. Around here, you know how it is. We just joked about Anthony Richardson, QB1, like we draft to win. And the reality is I'm relatively confident in saying drafting Nick Chubb this year is not going to be the reason that you win your league, but he can be the reason that you waste a roster spot. with somebody who could have been maybe like a backup, a handcuff or somebody with more upside.
Yeah, he's going in that 137 range. So it's an pick ADP number 137. So he's definitely going down with that that news. Some of the other guys in that range, I'm looking at underdog rankings. Let me see. There's some wide receivers that are going in there. Juwan Johnson, who could come out. Legette, who we just talked about. Ricky Pearsall for the 49ers. I'm not expecting much from him, but I think he might be a little bit up. But some of those wide receivers that are shots, that they're going in that range, and some of the quarterbacks that are going in that at that point right there, that's Jared Goff goes right before then, and let me see who else. Justin Herbert is going in that range, so he's going 5 picks before. So that's the thing, amigos y amigas. So it's duro to talk about it. Not easy to talk about it because Nick Chubb has been so good for fantasy football, but man, there's realities, and Edwin just laid out the realities. Another knee injury. Gabe Davis was slowed during minicamp, and he suffered a PCL sprain during the playoffs. And, was talking about still having residual soreness from that. They're saying that it could be that it should be fine. No surgery is involved, but, you've seen these things that have lingered. Where is the level of concern with him?
Yeah, there's not no concern, I would say. There probably is a reason Buffalo let him go. I would say there's, this is lingering since last season. PCLs, we know, can be an absolute brutal injury. They're really tricky because you can manage them without surgery, or you can go surgery, and sometimes it's honestly a coin flip of how they respond. And, some examples of guys like, I want to say it was Brashard Perriman had a PCL, I believe. Julio Jones, sort of the last big injury he had was a PCL injury.
Right.
I hate to throw that out there. He was older, though. He was much older. Traylon Burks last year had a PCL injury. There are a lot of guys that simply don't respond well to a PCL. But there are a lot of guys who do, right? Zeke, he had a PCL injury in 22. And he came back, and Zeke you could say whatever you want about Zeke. He's still a productive NFL running back, even at his age. He had a PCL issue. Dalton Schultz, he had a PCL issue in 2022 as well. So, these guys that hyperextend their knee, they can continue to have these persistent issues with the PCL sprain in particular. So again, it's a coin flip. For me, if he's still, dealing with this in June and he hasn't really dealt with it and the Bills let him go, he's just 25 years old. I've done the Gabe Davis thing, and I had the really viral tweet that was hilarious. I don't know if you remember, compadre. It was in 2022. I tweeted I stole Ian Harditz's helicopter drop down that day, and I said something along the lines of like, just dropping down to say Gabe Davis, 8 receptions, 130 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And at some point in the game, he had like 7 receptions, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And people were just losing their mind. And it was hilarious because I did it on a whim, right? Like, I felt good about it because I was like, oh, this could be a big Gabe Davis day. And then it was almost the exact stat line. But anyway, I've done the whole Gabe Davis thing. I'm over it. I don't think that he has much upside, to be 100% honest with you. Maybe you can argue with me and tell me I'm wrong, but I don't see the point in moving forward with any Gabe Davis at this point.
No, I think he's more of a decoy right now for their team. I think it's good. I think that Brian Thomas, I love Brian Thomas. I think he's big, he's fast, and he's just so ultra talented. Once he figures out, gets his legs in the NFL. And Christian Kirk is still a really, really good NFL wide receiver. And so I think he's at least third in the pecking order. And they still have Evan Ingram too. So who led the NFL tight ends in the NFL in receptions last year. So I don't think I'm not really holding out much hope for Gabe Davis. So, but yeah. Okay. Last one, compa. Juwan Johnson. Not a big player for fantasy this year, but he had foot surgery last week, or I'm sorry, he was having foot surgery this week, and they're hopeful that he starts the season, but honestly, does the, something like foot surgery, doesn't that basically almost like knock him out for quite a while and a good chunk of training camp?
Yeah. So if we're talking, let's say, because we don't really know, right? But let's say that it is something like a Jones fracture. There are a lot of different, which is a fracture of the bone right above your small toe. There are some instances in which you can come back, but they're even in that specific injury, there are a lot of different subtypes and severities, etc. We don't know the situation, but if it is a Jones fracture, then it is probably a similar injury that Derrick Henry had, if you guys remember, in 2021. So that's a 10 to 12 week recovery, generally speaking, and it's probably another 4 to 6 weeks just to ramp him up and get him to the point where he can be productive. So I wouldn't plan on having, a productive, successful, healthy Juwan Johnson, especially the first quarter of the season or so, which I know is like a pretty big disappointment. And he's not a spring chicken anymore either. He's 27 years old. So he's just, again, was a guy that I could have been targeting, but now it's like, I'm sort of lukewarm on him. I don't necessarily think, you could take a flyer on him, but that's really the furthest I would take it at this point.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's going off at past pick 200. So really, he in a best ball draft, he would be the guy that you're that third tight end that you're taking a chance on. But man, I'm looking at that point, I'm looking at Jelani Woods with the Colts, or Gesicki with the Bengals, even Noah Gray with the Chiefs. If you got Patrick Mahomes, yeah, it's tough to take that chance. So oh man, compa, well, we ran through these guys. A good Chisme edition, but fun cultura class after we got a little heavy last time. So compa, lucha, let's get on a soapbox and why lucha libre is better than AEW and WWE.
It's the OG, man. It's the original lucha libre, man. It was huge in Mexican culture. Huge for the all the masked characters. It was really a special time in the world, man. When especially like I love the movie Nacho Libre.
Yes,
although we could be offended by that movie, but I hate it so much because it's so funny, and the characters are hilarious, and for some reason they're in Mexico but they're speaking English with the Spanish accent. Again, I could be very offended. I'm not. I think it's just the stupidest, most funny movie. I love all the luchadores in there with the masks, right? So yes, we can certainly put the listeners, the viewers on game about lucha libre.
Oh, I'm telling you, Mil Máscaras and El Santo, the two great masked warriors are just it's so funny. In fact,
you're really throwing back though. I mean, those are some OGs, right? So the biggest, I remember growing up, I loved, and this is obviously most people probably, I loved Eddie Guerrero. And Rey Mysterio, dude, I loved all of those. I love those characters. Rey Mysterio, if I got to say one masked OG, like for me, it's got to be Rey Mysterio. He climbed the ladder of the WWE, and he did it. He basically was like the a Muggsy Bogues of WWE, and he was the guy for a while there. And it was cool, and it was fun to see a Mexican, a Latino at the top on TV doing anything, especially in those days, right? Like that was pretty early in the days where you didn't see a lot of representation for any reason when it came to Mexican culture. And I didn't love the Eddie Guerrero who like made us look bad. I didn't love him as much because it was like, I lie, I cheat, I steal. It's like, oh dude, Eddie, you're not doing any favors, dude. So anyway, but I thought he was funny. I like this character too. But yes, if I had to go with a masked luchador, I have to say Rey Mysterio.
Rey Mysterio. I know he's such an all-timer. I did go back to the OGs one. I never saw I did see versions of Mil Máscaras. In fact, I have even seen them here and there pop up since. But I mean, that to me that made it. By the way, Familia, Andre, I can attest, I saw Andre the Giant wrestle in lucha libre when I was a kid. So that was before he was, the WWE superstar. So not to age myself a little bit there. So good times. But yeah, it's love lucha libre. Long live lucha libre. So siempre. Oh man. Well, compa, let's call it a show. Hey, you know what? Amigos, amigas, make sure you're following the Injury Prone podcast on YouTube. Hit that like, hit that subscribe. We're going to be getting so much great information to you all over the place. You know where to find him. He's at FB Injury Dog, but also look at that shirt, Pro Athlete Physical Therapy. Follow on all the socials. He's got great episodes coming up on his great episodes. Go back and listen to the episodes that he's already had on the Pro Athlete PT podcast. So it's good times. Good.
I have
good
one
time.
more plug.
Oh, dígame.
People have asked, will the Injury Prone draft guide be out in 2024? The answer is yes. Stay tuned. I don't want to give any spoilers, but Jorge's involved. Yes. We're going to be doing this together, this project this year. We're working on it as we speak. And the draft guide will be available, we're hoping, at the end of July. So leave a comment down below if you're interested in the draft guide.
Yeah, right in time. And I'll keep putting like where to order in all the in all the show notes, so you could see that there. But yeah, where to follow. Get that draft guide, amigos, amigas. Es importante. Some of the best information you're going to get that's going to help you. I mean, make sure to get, friends of the show, make sure to get, JJ's draft guide, make sure to, so our other friends of the show and Reception Perception, they've got great information. We got the good stuff coming to you too. So I'm Jorge Martin. Find me at Jorge Martin 17. You're going to be seeing my content, Yahoo, RotoWire, Fantasy Bros, all over the place. Muchas gracias everybody for joining us. Ahí nos vamos. Salud.